Melanie.
And this is Christian.
You're listening to Follow the Gradient, the weekly podcast with actionable insights about how to build a business while staying sane. Welcome back to another episode of Follow the Gradient. It's Melanie here, and as always, I'm joined by Christian. Christian,
Yes.
Today is a very special episode because it's our last one of season 1. We have now published, including this one, 12 episodes. We have published 30 newsletters. It's been a crazy year. It's also end of year. And we both discussed before we started this episode here that we really wanted to use this time to reflect not only on Follow the Gradient, but also maybe on a more personal level, what 2024 had in store for us and what this means, maybe also for the future.
True. I mean, 12 episodes does feel like a lot. It does really feel like an eternity, I have to say. I did not imagine when we started out that we would make it, right? After like episode 3 or 4, I was thinking, okay, this is going to be a long stretch. But we made it, and it was a lot of fun, and I'm already looking forward to January when we release the new ones. And I think we already have some recordings planned and in play. Well, end of the year, I think it's at the end of the year always the time to reflect, and there is a lot of, I think, posts out there when I look at LinkedIn or other social media platforms which talk about self-reflection or some form of journaling. And I think we also talked about that. Interestingly, you told me, and I think the first time you told me about that was like 3 or 4 years ago, and I never picked up that thought, but now I want to pick it up again, about a journaling technique you are using, I think once a year, if I remember correctly. So maybe you can share more about that.
Yes. I mean, to be honest, like every year I think like, oh, I should do that every month and in the best case every day, but I always fail, and I'm not sure whether it's so bad because at least once a year, normally in the last couple of days. This year I'm super early with doing that, but is the time where I actually sit down and follow a very straightforward template that I actually found now, I think 5 years ago, when I was randomly stumbling upon a Medium article called How to Conduct an Annual Life Review That Will Catapult You into the New Year's by Steve Schlafman. I dived into it, and I must say, since I found this template, I have recommended it to so many friends, to so many founder peers, because what I particularly like is that it is a structured way of how you can reflect not only on what things didn't go well or what you want to have as resolutions for next year, but it really goes deep into like some really interesting topics and questions especially. And maybe I can guide you through a little bit, and then you will do it also for the next few years. Because what I particularly liked is, since I'm doing that now since 5 years, you can really see some trends popping up, and some, like, for example, the question of what is giving you energy or what is taking away energy from you, or what are the people that mean a lot or that you didn't spend enough time, but also what milestones did you achieve and what didn't you achieve, and also what were the reasons and maybe excuses that the things that you said you are going to do, you didn't do. And I just think this is a pretty cool way of reflect on your year. But I stop here before I dive into how it actually looks like. Maybe you have questions because you didn't do that so far.
Yeah, so that so essentially what you're doing is that is obviously in writing form, right? So you actually write it down. You don't like just think about it. You actually note down your thoughts. So you properly sit down and you write some thoughts down.
Exactly, because every time, so I must say, like, I didn't always finish because there are quite a few questions. And every time when I didn't finish it, I was like, yeah, of course, like I reflected on it. I will certainly remember that next year. And it was every time that when I went back then and looked at what were my thoughts about certain topics or questions the year before, and I haven't filled it out, I couldn't remember it. And it was always like a real pity, because I feel it shows a lot on where you stand in life, where you stand in your energy audit when it comes to stress and work and business. And so I just think it really forces you to think through it. And if you write it down, for me, it always helps to really go deep into the question and be also very honest with myself.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I have a couple of questions there already, but let's maybe do it this way, that you first walk me through, and then we can talk about it.
Yeah. So there are four kind of steps or topics. And I also added a few that are important for myself over time. So it starts with plot your moments and milestones. So it's a nice way to really scroll through your photo timeline on your iPhone or phone you have. And it really asks you, hey, what were the key moments in January, February, March, up until December? I normally do that also, that I distinguish between personal life and also business life, just to make the distinctions, because what means a nice milestone for me on a personal level might be different on a business level. And what I added since 2 or 3 years is also a section about the music that I was listening to. And thanks Spotify for always reminding me of what kind of music I was listening at certain points in the last year. And I also add what books I started. And here, emphasis on started, because every time at the end of the year, like there are so many books I wanted to read and I didn't get to. So for me, this is just a way to also make myself accountable, because for me music is very important, as well as also podcast listening. So this year, for example, I belonged to the 0.5% of business and technology podcast listeners worldwide. So this tells a lot where I also spend a lot of time on. But for me, music is also a way, like, okay, how was my stress level? Because depending on my stress level, I listen to other music. So that is the first part. The second part asks you to really reflect and examine. So it asks you about the success and the growth you went through in this 365 days. It also talks about like failure and where you felt short. It talks about people and relationships. So for example, a question that I found very intriguing is like, which person in your life had the biggest impact on you? And be it positive or be it negative. And I find it a very strong question, and also a very revealing one. And then it ends with lessons and themes in this second bucket. As a third topic, it's like really assess your life right now. And there I also adapted a bit like the template. And it really is super simple. It has a score of 1 to 10, and it goes through where do you stand from 1 to 10 in terms of health and family and friends, love, money, career, spirituality, personal growth. And I also added fun. I added a technology. So for me, this means how much did I use technology, but also in a good or rather bad way, in a sense, like, was I really, for example, leveraging the tools that are out there for making my life easier? Or did I spend most of my time on Instagram scrolling random posts and then losing and wasting a lot of time? And for me, nature is a key thing, that it's also where I recharge. So where do I stand? Did I had enough outdoor activities? Where I climbing? Where I doing ski tours and stuff like that? And then for me, it's also, and this I think is that what I added. So really, like, how much culture and intellectual nourishment did I have? Did I go to museums? Did I go to the opera or watch a theater or go to the movie theater? So stuff like that, because for me, that's a very important point. Yes, and then it ends with the fourth and last one. It's, I think, what we all know about this New Year's resolution, but I really like the way how this template is made. It's like plan for the new year. So really goals, growth. Where do I want to grow? What do I want? Where do I want to move on? What are habits, behaviors that I want to continue? But also, what are maybe bad habits that I want to stop? And it also talks about what are my fears, relationships, who are the people that are important to me, and the next steps and planning. And then what I really like is it tells you like, okay, what are the 10 or 20 goals you have, and what are the things you want to approach. But then it asks, okay, but now what are the three really the most important goals you want to achieve? What will stand in your way? How can you actually tackle this challenge? What resource will you use to actually tackle or achieve this goal? And also, where do you want to maybe develop a new skill in actually to achieve that? And what I also really like is that it really challenges you on, okay, but now what are things that you can do tomorrow? Because I think this is also why I always hated resolutions. It's always this big like things that either are like, oh, I want to be more healthy, or I want to read more books, or I want to like whatever, like it is like very broad. So you can then decide at the end of the next year, yes, I achieved it, or no, I didn't. But it doesn't really drill it down to concrete milestones. So what I really like is if you say, for example, okay, I want to have like one book that I read in January, because this is something achievable, or I want to go running on every Tuesday morning for 15 minutes if you haven't run for the past couple of years. So it really helps you to find something that is achievable, easy to do, but also then trackable. And I think as entrepreneurs and founders, like focus is everything, like really making sure that the metrics are something that you can track so you also see where you stand. I think these are ways how you can also leverage that for your own personal life.
How long do you actually need for this? Is this like for you like a 2-hour thing, or more than I spread it across 1 week, but each day I need like 3 hours?
So ideally you would start a couple of weeks and then write it down. Then we like have a couple of days in between. And to be honest, the last couple of years, it was most often on the 31st of December where I sat down and was like, I know if I don't do it now, I won't do it. So there I only had a couple of, maybe 2 hours, 3 hours. So I feel very privileged this year that it's now only beginning of December and I already went through it one time. I mean, I haven't filled out everything, but I added a few bits and pieces there, and I can really see why there is so much value to actually start a little bit early, because it also, it's just like more time helps you also to really go back and think and be very honest with yourself, I feel.
Yeah, it's true. I think I really can relate with what you said in the beginning about it makes you feel accountable. To be honest, I've never done this type of once in a year review, but one thing I'm really a big fan of, and a friend of mine told me about that maybe 1 or 2 years ago, is the concept of weekly write-ups, right? He basically told me about how their company, and I think he works in the space of product management, how they do in the team weekly write-ups where basically you go through the same questions at the end of the week, each week, right? And these questions are usually around, what were my objectives this week? Have I achieved them? If not, why not? What are my objectives for next week? If there is one roadblock which I could remove, which would make me faster, what would it be? And I think this can sound a little bit, that each week you give yourself a lot of pressure. But it doesn't have to be this way. I think one thing that happens is it gives you structure because you really sit down at the end of the week and look at, okay, I had expectations to my week originally. What has come of these expectations, right? Because one thing that really happens when you do this exercise, I think, is you realize that you plan for way too much, right? You want to do like 10 different things next week. And then you realize at the end of next week that I have only done 3. And that's completely okay because my plan was just completely unrealistic. It forces you to sit down and then to think about, okay, knowing what I know now, what do I want to do next week? And the good thing is that because you have made this plan, and the plan is obviously somewhat superficial and it's only on a weekly basis. But the great thing is because you've made this plan during the week, you do not have to worry about, am I on the right track, right? Because it can happen, especially when you have a lot on your plate at work or you have to make a lot of decisions. It can happen that you constantly doubt yourself. Are we going into the right direction? Am I going into the right direction with what I'm doing or with what I'm working on, with my task or my project? And the great thing with these weekly write-ups is it really gives you space to think about the direction once a week and to review that, and therefore also takes away that pressure to think about the direction you're going whenever your thought comes up or whenever you have a doubt, right? So that was one concept I used, and to be honest, I haven't been using it in the recent past.
Yeah.
But I really want to do that again. And to be honest, if you ask me what is the biggest leverage on whatever I want to do at work or somewhere else, then my number one answer would always be this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there are 2 points that I find very important. Is like you were mentioning in it, and that's also the great thing about doing it on a weekly basis. I find myself as well, but also others, like we are sometimes so concentrated on like being very hands-on, being very operationally involved, and we kind of sometimes really forget the North Star, the bigger picture, like why I'm actually doing that. And if you do that on a weekly or monthly, or in my case, yearly basis, it really forces you to step out of it for a couple of hours and look at it from a more objective, a more general perspective, and really also, if you're really honest, and sometimes it's not easy, because if you're really honest, there are a lot of things where you're just like, oh, I fell short, and I did it again. Like there are a few topics that come up again and again and again. I'm just like, Melanie, don't you actually learn how to do that? Like it's coming up for the 5th time now, but it really helps you to just reflect on yeah, what is it, why you're doing all of this. And so this is on the business basis, but the reason why I actually started to do that in the first place was, I think back then 5 or 6 years ago, I was reading this book from this lady who is helping people that are actually in the end state of their life and they're about to die, and she's just like accompanying them on their way. And she wrote about, I think, the 5 regrets that people have. And for me, this book was so revealing, because nobody out of these hundreds of people that she kind of accompanied was saying, hey, I should have worked more, or I should have earned more money, or whatever it is. Most of the people were always talking about people and like the relationship they should have invested more on. And when it came to work, it was most often like I should have done what I always felt was my way, and I should have gone the unpathed path where I felt my passion was in. And now, of course, you now cannot just stop like working. It's not about that. This was not my conclusion. My conclusion was like really like, okay, I'm now in my 30s. Like there's so much going on. There is family, and there is friends, and there is business, and there is opportunity and ambition and all of these. And it sometimes is so easy to get lost in all of this and just like think, okay, let's make an all-nighter again and work more and blah, 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 and hustle along. And I still have time. It's always this feeling of I still have time. But in the end, our life has an end at some point, and we don't know when this is. And so I always try to go at this one point in life where my life will end, and try to look back and think of, hey, if I would now be at this stage and would reflect on this specific year, would I do the same thing that I'm currently doing? And so far, it was most often that I'm very, very privileged in saying, hey, I'm absolutely loving what I'm doing. And of course, there are days who are just like bad, and the motivation is nowhere to be found, and like all of this, of course. But just like the general direction and the general like way of living is kind of what I would say, okay, if tomorrow would be my last day, I would kind of still do what I'm doing in general. And I think that is a really helpful tool to kind of find answers to something that is so abstract and so far away. And so since we only do that, maybe at the end of it, we completely forget while we're doing it that this is actually now where we can have an impact on our own lives. So this is why I think I started that in the first time.
Yeah, and I think on that note, I heard a quote once, I think from Jeff Bezos, and I think I know that Jeff Bezos is obviously a controversial figure, right? But there is one or two quotes out there from him which I really like. One of them is, you want to minimize the number of regrets you have in life. And that plays into that notion, is that you want to take that perspective on, in the future, there will be a point where I look back on something, and what do I want to look back on? And why I like this perspective of regrets is that it's often the things you don't do which you regret than the things
Absolutely.
which you do, right? It's, you can feel sorry when you try to do something and you fail, or it doesn't work out the way you like. You will probably feel frustrated, sad, sorry. But usually you will not regret it. At least I personally have not made this experience. But if you, for some reason, wanted to do something and you haven't, this is something you regret.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that quote, therefore. And I think it also plays what we're talking about now, and I don't want to tease too much into what is coming for next year, right? But we will talk to a lot of founders in our podcast in January and February. And one notion which has really come up during the preparation was that obviously it's not only so work and life is for many of these people in the founding ecosystem something which is very hard to separate. So we will also talk about work-life balance, or life and family, and balancing these two aspects with work. And I think also these types of environments often take a huge toll on people, right? They can be very stressful mentally, obviously also physically. And we also want to somehow talk about that. I think we still don't know how yet, to be fully honest, because it's a very sensitive topic, but we definitely want to leave some room there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's really I mean, we started off with the slogan, which I love more and more the more I say it. But I mean, what we want to achieve with Follow the Gradient is teach or share insights about how to build a business in Europe while staying sane. And I remember when we discussed about the second part of the sentence about the staying sane, we were like, yeah, should we keep that? And it was so important for us to not only talk about how to scale a business and make it successful, be it in terms of like money and growth and employee numbers and fundraising and or funds raised, but really also what personally we believe in is that success not only involves like these kind of parts, but also your sanity, your health, the relationships that you still have also once the chapter of your startup is closed, be it on a good note or on a bad note, it doesn't matter, but like which are the people and the things that kind of nourish you once the journey is over. So this is why I'm very excited about season 2. Of course, we will always also have hands-on insights about the business perspective, but we believe that you cannot talk business without talking about the human in it. So
True.
I think that's a great segue into what awaits us in 2025. We follow the gradient, and maybe also what we discussed, Christian, before we started this episode, how our community can also be involved. Because talking about community, maybe I can also share some things that I absolutely loved when reflecting on this year. We started off in March. I checked on the 1st of March. We met for a random catch up. We talked about this podcast thing, and then a few weeks later we kicked off with our first newsletter, and then a few months later we kicked off with the podcast. And like we were totally newbies. Of course, we are vivid readers of newsletters and vivid listeners, as you can as you've heard from my Spotify Wrapped stats. But we really didn't know a lot of people in this space. And what I have found incredible is just the openness of this community. The people that I randomly reached out on LinkedIn to and was like, hey, I saw that you're doing this and that, and just ask a question. And people who just took hours sometimes. They would just hop on a call. I mean, just the other day, we together hopped on a call with a very distinguished audio producer that just took 1 full hour on answering our question. He even took some time to assess our podcast and gave us tips and tricks. And that is really something that I found mind-blowing. The people, how open they are, how they want to help you. And I think, I found that also among founders. And I really think it's so, so valuable. And this is also how we can grow with the feedback that we get from people who are in the same space and going through the same ups and downs.
I definitely got a lot of respect for radio moderators or people working in the media, right? Because it's you come to appreciate how hard it is, or at least I think personally for me to speak in an engaging way and yet fluently and without too much preparation. And I think people in the radio are obviously, I mean, yes, they are trained for that, but still, I came to respect that skill a lot. And as you said, right, it's we had a couple of themes when we started out. As you said, one was obviously that staying sane part. Another one was that we wanted to provide tangible, actionable advice. And this is what we try to focus on in the previous 11 episodes, right? Today, there is 2 types of advice from us. The year-end journaling technique from you, the weekly write-up, which I can personally recommend. But looking forward to 2025, what I think is most important to us, that we hear from you, from our listeners. What are you actually interested in? What is valuable for you? Because we also realize there is a lot of content out there and a lot of stuff. But we found it very hard to get really tangible, actionable advice from all that content out there. And it is very hard to find that and to produce that. And if you have an area which you want us to dive deeper into, please let us know. This is in the end all what's it about. And the other thing is, if you have any types of questions on the content we have, follow-ups, or you want us to take a different direction on a topic we discuss, let us know anytime.
Yeah, and tell us what you absolutely want to keep, but also tell us where we might improve, because I think from these kind of feedbacks we can learn a ton. And here also a big shout out to the people who have reached out to us in the past few months, because we were really honestly overwhelmed by people reaching out to us we didn't know, who were really being very straightforward, being very direct on what they liked, where they would want to have more of it. We were overwhelmed by the people who told us like how they have actually shared the podcast with others, with their team members, with other founders, with their mentees and mentors. And this is really where, if we had one wish from our listeners, besides giving us feedback, be it through the form that we will add to the notes, or by directly commenting in the Spotify comments, it's really share. If you like what you're hearing, please really share it with people that could benefit from it, because I think if we now put the life in review over Follow the Gradient, and remember about this kind of 1 to 10 section where you have to rate your growth and your health and your like technology and so on. I think when it comes to growth, like we saw tremendous growth in the past month, but this was all organically, and we know there is so much more that we can achieve when we get in front of the right people. So we don't want to tease too much. There will be collaborations and partnerships in the upcoming month, but if you know like places where we should play, if you know people who should hear about us, then please share it with them, or just let us know on which party we should play, so that we can show up there and make sure that more people benefit from it, so that we really make sure that we here in Europe like kind of have this movement and community that makes sure that we bring up the next big technology companies in a healthy and sustainable way. Because I think that is what we really realized also when we were doing the newsletter. There are always these topics that come up again and again, that Europe is behind and lagging, and there are a lot of problems, and it's scattered across the markets. And we both are problem solvers, and we don't want to just like remain thinking about how everything is bad and how everything should go to the US and stuff like that. We learn a ton of the US market. We learn a ton of the US founders and VCs and so on. But we are also convinced that we have the right talents here. We have the right innovations here. We have money. And all we need is like the people working together, collaborating across markets, having the right mindset of really trying. If it fails, go up again and try again. And this is our small contribution, what we want to achieve with this podcast and this newsletter and to Follow the Gradient community, to really make sure we make everything possible to kind of create a community of strong founders and startup operators in Europe.
I think that's a perfect closing word of the year 2024, at least for our podcast. We will be back with our show and season 2 of the Follow the Gradient on January 9th. It will continue as usual every Thursday. And as we said before, we will start with the founder perspective and look deeper at the stages of Series A to Series B in the next year. In the meantime, obviously, there will be a couple of newsletters before the year closes.
We will also share some of the episodes again, especially the first ones, as we now have grown quite heavily. We know that not everyone has listened to the first few episodes, so we will do a replay. So that is certainly one thing you can look for. And make sure to subscribe, because we know that not all the listeners are subscribers yet. Let us know what you think, and how we can make 2025 the best years we ever had.
See you in 2025. And And this was another episode of our Follow the Gradient podcast.
And now we would love to hear from you. How did you like it? What should we improve? Do you have any suggestions, ideas, or dream podcast guests? Please let us know.
Thank you and see you again next week.